Good evening. Today is Thursday, November 19th, 2020. I now call this Fairfield Board of Education regular meeting to order. Mrs. Lane, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Begley?
Here.
Mr. Birding?
Present.
Mr. Clark?
Present.
Mrs. Gundram?
Here.
Mrs. Shorter?
Here.
Hey, Mr. Clark, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. First item on the agenda is presentations and resolutions. I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Birding and members of the board. We do have one presentation this evening, and on the agenda it's listed as planning for the ACT, but as you can see by the PowerPoint, we have ACT, SAT, and AP preparing students for their future. We have our high school principal, Mr. Bill Rice, here this evening, as well as one of our assistant principals, Mr. Kareem Sanders. And we also have Mrs. Katie Pospischel from Secondary Curriculum. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mandy Aug, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Birding, members of the board. We are here tonight to talk about the Prepared for Success measure on the Ohio State Report Card, along with the work being done to prepare students to take and succeed on the ACT. So I'm thankful to have Mrs. Pospischel, Mr. Sanders, and Mr. Rice here tonight. Mrs. Pospischel is going to talk to you about the role of the ACT, SAT, and AP tests and what role they play on the state report card. And then she will turn it over to Mr. Sanders and Mr. Rice, who will talk more in depth about the testing at the high school and preparation for students to take the ACT. Before I turn it over to them, I do want to remind you and the public that COVID drastically changed the information released on Ohio's state report card. In fact, we're not even giving a report card presentation this year because there is so little to share from the released 2020 report card. However, we do have data from the Prepared for Success component because this indicator uses data from the 2 prior years, meaning the data used for the 2020 report card is from the 2018 and 2019 school years. So we did want to share that with you tonight, and I also think you'll be excited to hear about what we've been doing to prepare for the ACT this year. So at this time, I will turn it over to Mrs. Pospischel, our Coordinator of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction.
Thank you, Mrs. Ogg. Mr. Smith and Board of Education, thank you for having us speak tonight on the objectives stated by Ms. Ogg. I have to figure out where to point this. There we go. I wanted to take a few moments to review the components of the Prepared for Success portion of the state report card. As Mrs. Ogg stated, this is one of the few areas of the 2020 report card that we have data since it addresses the students from the 2018 and 2019 graduation cohorts. Prepared for Success looks at how well prepared the students are for their future opportunities, whether it's training in a technical field or preparing for work or college. How the state measures the preparedness of the students is determined by the following. Districts will receive 1 point for every student who, 1, earns a remediation-free score on the SAT or ACT. For the ACT, those scores are an 18 in English, a 22 in math, a 22 in reading, and a 23 in science. They can graduate with an honors diploma, or if they obtain 12 points within an industry credential. Students who receive one of these points also have the opportunity to gain an additional 0.3 if they score a 3 or higher on an AP exam, earns at least 3 credits in College Credit Plus, or in some districts participate in International Baccalaureate. Based on the percentage that comes from this formula, the district earns a letter grade for the component of the report card. So let's look at the graduating classes of 2018 and 2019 for the Fairfield City Schools. Fairfield City Schools had 646 students who earned 1 point, and out of those 646 students, 408 of the students earned the additional 0.3, giving Fairfield the total points of 768.4. The graduation cohorts of 2018 and 2019 contained 1,620 students. When you divide 768 by 1,620, you get 47.4, having Fairfield obtain within this percentage the range of D. The next slide breaks down the percentages of students within each given category. 24.4% of the students in the 2018-2019 cohort earned a remediation-free score on the ACT. 31.2% of the students earned a state honors diploma. 36.5% of the students participated in advanced placement classes, while 13.5% of those students earned an AP score of 3 or higher. What is unfortunately cut off at the bottom of the percentage is the students obtaining 3 credits in College Credit Plus, which is 25.3%. I have also shared with you on this slide the college ready component of Prepared for Success. You'll notice that 58% of our students of the graduating class of 2017 entered an in-state public college or university, and 36.4% of the class of 2013 graduated from an in-state public college or university within 6 years of leaving high school. Now that you know the components of Prepared for Success, let's look specifically at some of the measures that are compiled to increase our score within this category. As many of you know, the state requires all 11th grade students to take either the ACT or SAT. At Fairfield, we administer the ACT to students due to the wide use of ATC scores for colleges and universities within the Midwest. The dates of the state test of the ACT were right before all schools went remote due to the pandemic, and that is why we have the 2020 ACT data available. This slide shows the mean ACT scores of the 11th grade students within Fairfield. As you can see, for the past 2 years, our students have remained within the 18 to 20 point range for all tested areas, with the mean composite score of 19.6. The next slide shows student performance on AP exams from 2016 to 2020. The College Board decided to still offer AP exams to students who had registered for the exam in the fall of 2019, if they chose to complete it. As you know, last year was the first year that Fairfield was paying for the examination fee for all of our students. Even with the extreme and strange circumstances surrounding their testing, Fairfield still had 437 students who decided to take 839 exams, with 60.4% of them scoring a 3 or better during the worldwide pandemic. I would also like to quickly draw your attention to the increase of not only students within our AP program, but the increase of exams taken. Fairfield has removed many barriers for students who are interested in participating in the AP courses. And we have an increase of 207 students and 466 AP exams taken. Mr. Sanders and Mr. Rice will be talking in detail regarding the preparation our students are receiving for the ACT. So I would simply like to highlight the preparation for AP exams and the SAT and only touch quickly on the ACT. For the AP, we have no cost for our students to test, which has eliminated the barrier of the expense of about $90 for students to take the exam. Instructional reports that teachers use to see the strengths and opportunities for the growth within their instruction. And the College Board online platform is accessible to each student to have progress checks, practice questions, and AP course assignments. For the ACT, because this is not the assessment Fairfield has chosen for the state requirement, the actual test preparation is sought by students who are wanting to take the test outside of the school day. Our school counselors have test prep information, private tutoring information, prep courses for students who are interested. And for the students who would prefer to prepare on their own, there are a multitude of online resources such as the Khan Academy. In relation to the ACT, both our freshman school and high schools have building goals related to the ACT. Both buildings are administering practice ACT tests and incorporating ACT-style questions within the coursework and exams. I now have the pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Sanders to give you a detailed look at what FHS has done, is doing, and will do to help the students be successful within the ACT.
Thank you, Ms. Postofficial, Superintendent Smith, board members, other district leaders in the room, Principal Rice. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to come up and present some data and some information we feel that will continue to propel Fairfield High School to the level that we feel this school needs to be at. The slide here is presented on the screen. It talks about college and career-ready courses, ACT subtests, and ACT benchmark scores. If you look at the different subtests in reference to the ACT tests, English composite scores of an 18 is the benchmark. College algebra, 22. For mathematics, social science, and reading, benchmark score of 22. Biology and science is benchmark score of 23. So what that benchmark score entails is just a standard reference, okay, that you can compare and assess information. We provided you with a list of local universities for some baseline data for college acceptance. If you can see here, you have Cincinnati State. The typical composite range for admissions is 16 to 21. For Kent State and NKU, 20 to 24. UC Ohio is 22 to 28. Miami of Ohio, OSU, 26 to 32, and Duke and Vanderbilt is 30 to 36. So you see our sophomore data presented here on the screen. We have a minimum score, a maximum score, a college readiness score, and an average score. The minimum score for English, you see you have 3. The maximum score for English was a 29. The minimum score for math was a 1. Maximum score for math was a 33. Reading minimum score was a 1. Max score 34. Science 1 and math score 36. The minimum composite score was 5, and the maximum score, composite score, was 30. Again, we've already presented you the college readiness benchmark for those sub-areas of 18 for English, 22 for math, 22 for reading, 23 for science. And you see the composite score, the average score for each sub-test. English is 13.14. Math is 15.64, reading being 15.27, and science being 15.18. Now we are kind of off from where we want to be, but we do have a plan of action, and we will review that here shortly. And that information is provided by Torch Prep. I'll go into a little bit more detail about Torch Prep. That is our ACT vendor that we're using. They focus on the analyzation of ACT scores, remediation, training teachers to be able to analyze the scores and to be able to remediate different skills and topics from the ACT test. Our junior scores, you'll see our junior scores are a little bit higher, and because they may be higher because they're older, number one, and being older, they have been exposed to more of the curriculum, so they will be better equipped to take the test. Thank you. The minimum score for English, 2. Minimum score for math, 1. Maximum score for English is 34. Maximum score for math is 36. Reading, 1. Maximum score for reading is a 36. Science, 1. Maximum score for science is a 34. Minimum composite score is a 3. And maximum composite score is 35. And again, how that relates to college readiness, 18 for English, 22 for math, 22 for reading, and 23 for science. That gives us an average of 14.81 for English, 17.12 for math, 16.62 for reading, 16.89 for science, and 16.36 composite score. And that information was also calculated by Torch Prep. So now, what's next? We know the scores, we know where we are at this time, so we have to have a plan of action. And our plan of action starts with working with Torch Prep. They've already provided training. Our teachers participated in a PD. It was about 2 hours long. Our math and our English teachers participated in that PD back in the beginning of November, and they walked away with a lot of valuable information that we feel like we're ready to go back and to disseminate to our students to improve our test scores. As Ms. Post-Pitcher alluded to earlier, ACT is a prime indicator on our state report card in reference to student achievement. So we are really looking at moving our scores forward and doing what we need to do to ensure that our students are college and career ready. If you look at the first slide here, the first bullet is a digital program that Torch Prep is providing to all juniors in the high school. We have about 750 students that are juniors. That program has been purchased by the district and will be, all our juniors will have access to that digital program. Mr. Ruffin, if you will click on that, go back for me, one more. Could you click on that first link, please? Sir? Okay. But that bullet there, that link there is a digital flyer at a value of $200. Again, all our junior students have access to that digital program. And what's great about that, you can use it in any type of form of remediation, whether it's in school or at home. If we're in a situation where we have to transition back to a hybrid model or remote standing, the students can utilize this information from home and continue to utilize and remediate for the skills that they are deficient in reference to ACT. And here we go.
Hey everybody, it's Andrew from Torch Prep, and I want to talk to you about Torch Prep's digital boot camp. If you're watching this video, then it's probable that your student or you are being provided access by your school to Torch Prep's digital boot camp course. So I just kind of want to walk you through the basics of it so that you can step into it confident that you know what's going on. So first of all, what is Torch Prep's digital boot camp? Well, Torch Prep for over a decade has been teaching highly effective, proven ACT test prep courses to high school students all over our area. And our digital boot camp is simply our time-tested curriculum in a video-based digital format. If you log into the course, you're going to see Torch Prep's founder, his name is Rhett, teaching all of our ACT testing strategies that you would see in an in-person Torch Prep boot camp. So it's the same curriculum that we have taught to students for over a decade, ported to a digital format. And so as you watch these videos, as you get into them, you're going to see all 4 core ACT subjects broken down, and you're going to learn strategies for all 4 of those core ACT subjects, just like you would in one of our in-person courses. Now
So, just wanted to give you a brief overview of what the digital program entails. You can go ahead and go to the exit out of that for me, please. And again, all our juniors have access to that information. Right now, we have about 75 juniors signed up, so I had to think to myself, how can I get the biggest bang for my buck to make sure that I disseminate this information to all the juniors? So we have a homeroom schedule, a 30-minute homeroom schedule. When we return from Thanksgiving break, at that time, the teachers will actively sit there and help all the juniors that they teach to log on and register to use the digital program. So that way we can cover the mass and ensure that all students are signed up to utilize this program. If you go to the next hyperlink, Torch Prep will be doing an intensive boot camp with our middle-of-the-road kids. And what I mean by middle-of-the-road kids, kids that scored a composite score of 16 to 21 on the PACT. Okay, the PACT provided us with some baseline data. So we can do an item analysis, so we can look at skills that the students are deficient in. And once we identified those kids who are middle of the road, who have that score of 16 to 21, Now we provide those students with intensive boot camp with Torch Prep founders, Mr. Red Barber. He will be here on February the 8th and the 9th, as well as the 11th and the 12th, to provide test-taking strategies, test-taking tips, remediate students on their low-hanging fruit, and I'll go in detail here in a second about what low-hanging fruit, what that term means. So right here, what you see on the screen, that's 250 kids that we identified as the middle-of-the-road students that I just alluded to. So we feel like those kids can continue to push their scores forward to be college and career ready, as well as continue to help us improve our student achievement in reference to our state report card. So I had a conversation with Mr. Rice, and I say to myself, and Mr. Rice said back to me, he said, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck and ensure that all students have the access to remediate? We know we have some extensive boot camp for our middle-of-the-road kids. Now, how can we target our lower-performing kids and even our upper-performing kids? So I said, hey, let's make all 4 days a school-wide boot camp. Let's embrace the theme. Let's the teachers and the staff members come in dressed in Army fatigue, and we really push it and embrace the role, embrace the theme, and the students will buy in. So during that time, on February the 8th, the 9th, and 10th, and 11th, not only will our middle-of-the-road kids be receiving extensive boot camp, all other juniors and 10th graders and seniors will be receiving boot camp from their content area teachers. Okay, and we will identify their low-hanging fruit. If you can click on that link for me there, Mr. Ruffett, it says low-hanging fruit. And this is information, analyzed information that Mr. Rhett Barber provided us from Torch Prep. If you could scroll down, please. So you have an example here. Keep going down a look. Right here, right there, go up. I'm sorry. Right there. So every student that took the PSAT, there was an item analysis, and there was a document provided for what areas they were deficient in. So if you see here, this student here, low-hanging fruit in English, they're struggling in basic sentence structure, essential and non-essential, and conclusions. So the teachers have that document. So when they work with the students during the boot camp, they will use ACT prep books, and they will attack those skills that they're deficient in. So the thing that was discovered is we know kids, they have more than 3 areas that they're deficient in, but you can't attack all those skills. You can't go in attacking 50 skills. So what skills that they are deficient in that are the highest percent on the test? So if it's these 3 skills that they're deficient in, those are the highest 3% skills in relation to the test. Does that make sense? So let's get the best bang for our buck and focus on the higher portion of questions that will be on the test. So those are the areas that the teachers will be remediating and reteaching during those 4 days. We have that information for English and math. No, you can exit out. Thank you. Next slide, please. Again, as I stated, we have identified the 60 areas, but we wanted to identify the top 3 or 4 areas to get the biggest bang for our buck. You know, they always say the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And we understand in 4 days we can't identify, work, and focus on those 60 areas. So let's focus on the top 3 areas. If you could click on that link for me there, please. That was just an example of a document that shows you the 60 areas that a student may be deficient in school-wide. That was a school-wide version of it. And as you can see it right there, those are the top 60 areas that students were deficient in school-wide. But again, we want to focus on the top 3 or 4 areas in that 4-day window. possessive noun, organization. But again, those as you get towards the bottom of that document, it's not a high percent question on the test, so let's not focus on that. You can exit out of that for me, please. Thank you. We understand that we have some work to do. And I told my teachers in a testing meeting yesterday, I think we have a good plan of action. Some research says that it takes 2 or 3 years to see a difference. So let's not expect to see it in 1 year. Let's do what we need to do to be effective. Let's next year look at extending this information to our sophomore students. So now they have 2 years to prepare. And I feel like we can be in a good position moving forward for these students here at the high.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Just a couple of things. I was reading expressions, so I want to clarify a few things. I saw some expressions on, kids getting 1s and 2s on that practice test. I think an overall theme and area that we have a challenge in is getting kids to buy into this work, and that is a struggle. When a kid gets a 1 on a practice ACT, it's intentional to get a 1, right? They're coming in and they're drawing pictures on the test. They're not taking it serious. And Mr. Sanders addressed some of that by making this a school-wide boot camp, getting our teachers behind it, getting some excitement behind it. Also want to talk just quickly about remediation scores and what a remediation score means. So in the world of a university, what they're identifying if a student gets that 18, they're saying 80% of kids that get that 18 will be successful in that subject matter in college, okay? Second point for that remediation score is below that score, if you're coming into a university below that score, you are taking classes that you're paying for that you're not receiving credit for your degree program. So if you are below that remediation free score in math, you are taking a remedial math, paying money for it, and it's not counting towards your degree. So it is very important for us to get our kids to that remediation free score. It's also, we talk with our staff about this all the time. We have to be selfish about this as well. It's extremely important for our school report card to get our kids up and achieve that. So that's why we identified with that intensive boot camp, those 250 kids that are right there. They're right on the cusp of getting to that remediation free score. I talk often with our head coaches where we have kids that have scholarship dollars on the table but can't qualify because they're not getting to that remediation free score. They're like right there. But again, they're coming in as juniors and they're scoring 11s on this test because it's a free test. I took it. Did I really try? Did I pay attention to the reviews that we were doing in class? I don't know. So one of the things we have to change and we have to identify is changing that attitude and taking these sorts of things serious. Torch Prep has been an amazing asset and resource for us. All this data analysis and item analysis, that's all done by them. So we administered the test for all the sophomores and juniors. They took it, did all their magic, and came back to us with all of these item analysis, this low-hanging fruit. Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? So we're super appreciative of them. Our teachers, we sat in on both of the PD sessions with the math and English teachers. They ate it up. They just absolutely loved it because it was geared specifically to those math and English. Some may wonder why are we focused on math and English. Well, math and English are content-based tests for ACT, so you have to get through the content in order to do well. Where social studies, reading, science, those are more skill-based. Can I read a diagram? Can I read a chart? Can I apply this information to this problem? So you don't necessarily have to have that science content to do well on those tests, where the research has said in English and math, you have to get through a certain amount of content. So that's another reason why you see such a big growth between sophomores and juniors, because sophomores simply haven't been through all of the content yet before they take that practice test. So we hope all of these plans put us on a trajectory that we know we need to go. It's not acceptable in Fairfield for our kids to be below state average in anything, period. And we say that all the time. So we know we have work to do. And with that, if you guys have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Questions, comments from the board?
Yes, I have some questions. I heard PSAT referenced. Now, with the PSAT scores, were those converted to like an ACT type score? I think 16 to 20, that score range was mentioned for the kids that were on the bubble. What conversion mechanism did you use to get from that PSAT score to an ACT score? Was that, because the PSAT scores are typically more like an SAT score. The highest is like, what, 1,400? They're usually in that type of term.
We
Like
don't do a lot with the PSAT, just speaking honestly. If you remember, and I guess we could have covered this earlier, we were super excited about that testing day that we presented last year, that one day where we're going to give kids choice to take work keys or PSAT or pre-ACT, and then COVID happened, and one day became 4 days, and we didn't get kids scheduled the way we wanted to because they were gone and on remote. I'm just speaking honestly, we don't do a lot of remediation with PSAT.
Okay, so did you mean, because PSAT was mentioned, so did you
Okay.
mean the launch ACT score?
Yeah, I'm assuming that. I don't know what the reference is. Our attention and our focus is on the PACT. That is our benchmark for our report card, so we're investing everything in getting our kids ready for the ACT. Less than 1% of our kids take the SAT. So again, speaking selfishly, we're not going to invest a lot in that. The kids that take the PSAT here are taking it for scholarship dollars because there's the National Merit Commended and National Merit Semifinalist scholarship dollars that are available. They take that PSAT, and then chances are they never take the SAT.
Right, I think I heard you wrong. I was hearing PSAT, you were saying pre-ACT.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, gotcha. With the pre-ACT, how closely does it mirror the actual ACT? Is it an old ACT from previous past years? How many questions are on it? How closely does it match an actual ACT?
To answer your question, yes, it's using previously released questions for that practice ACT.
Okay.
So it mirrors it extremely close. And Torch Prep advocates for when you give this test, you give it in its full length in one sitting because we identify test fatigue as an issue for our students. They don't take a lot of 3-4 hour tests. So we have to give it to them in that environment. So there's some stamina you have to build up to be able to stay, concentrating on one piece of material for that long. So they advocate very much so that you don't break it up over, 4 or 5 days. You give it to them in one chunk.
So it's this full size of an ACT. Okay. Can I ask another question about the decision to go with the pre-ACT versus just an ACT, just to give them some practice? Because you don't have to have those scores released if you don't want to. I just wonder if, if it makes sense to just give them an ACT and just let them start taking the ACT earlier, perhaps as early as the 10th grade.
All juniors will take the ACT in February.
Yes.
And what that PACT does, it allows us to identify the skills that the students are deficient in, and we can remediate through the year to increase those ACT scores when they take the real test.
Okay.
It would be extremely easy for us just to give them a practice ACT, but where the value is in what Torch Prep provides is all of that data analysis and item analysis that we just simply don't have the manpower to do. If we wanted to give them an ACT and run it through the Scantron and it just show us a raw score, we could do that. But the idea of low-hanging fruits, if you would have been in that room and saw our teachers' eyes light up when they're able to identify, look, these are the 3 things that if you can fix, kids' scores will improve. It's easy, tangible evidence for them to say, yeah, I can see that. And one of the activities they did, they sat together and looked at their curriculum and said, where can we put this stuff that we're learning today? So the bang for the buck for us with Torch Prep is that work. That work is invaluable. It's something we simply just do not have the manpower to do.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions, comments?
I did. I had a question. So then this pre-ACT, the 16 through 21, is that based on what we did here earlier in the fall, in this semester?
Yes,
We
sir.
already have those grades back, and we're analyzing those?
Yes, sir.
Put them through boot camp, and then be ready for February and future testing windows?
And the beauty of it, we set it up to where the students receive their score report to their phones. So when they pre-registered for the test, they inputted their personal cell phone numbers, and that score report went directly to their phones the first week of November.
Okay.
So again, to allude to what Mr. Rice just stated, that Torch Prep, they did all the legwork to identify those 250 kids that need to receive the extensive boot camp. And when you talk about test fatigue, that boot camp is a 6-hour-long course for 2 days. So day 1 is 6 hours, day 2 is 6 hours. And they really hit it really hard. And to touch on the touch points and the testing strategies that they will need to increase their scores by 2 to 3 points.
Sure. All right, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I think, as you said, right after Thanksgiving, we're hitting them hard and trying to engage them and trying to get them involved. And then, of course, the actual boot camp is a digital version, so if we are forced back into a remote environment, they're still going to be able to access these tools and use them and prepare for that February testing window. Right?
Yes, sir. And even if we're still here and, there's no change in our model, the kids, you have summer dip, you have winter dip. So we're going to provide incentives for our students to work on that digital program while they're home over the Christmas break. And the students that complete certain portions of the digital program, we're going to provide them with incentives to receive upon returning to school after the Christmas break. They provide a score report to the teachers. If they complete 50% in every area in math, English, science, social studies, then their name will be put in a pot and they will be able to receive some type of incentive just to promote the use of the digital program.
And then one last question about the cost. Torch Prep is a program that an individual can buy, and you've put there's a credit or a $200.
Well, the district, and correct me if I'm wrong here, man, the district paid for so many subscriptions for our juniors. And it's at a $200 value that the students have when they access the digital program.
Okay, so, and that's everyone? That's
all juniors.
All
juniors. All of our juniors, because
right.
juniors will take the test in February. So
Right. Okay.
And through conversation with Mr. Rice and Ms. Ogg, we may look at extending that to our sophomores for next year, so they'll have multiple years to remediate with that program.
Right. Okay, great.
So because we committed to the boot camps and having Torch Prep come in and work with our students, that's what allowed us, they threw that in as an incentive for us to hold the boot camps here for the test in February.
Great. That is great, because I think I see where, Torch Prep on your own is almost $500, so it obviously becomes cost prohibitive to many of our students. Great.
Any questions? Other questions?
Just thank you for all the information and for explaining the steps that are being taken to help the students prepare more in the future. And thank you for clearing up the scores of 1, because I was kind of wondering, do we have kids that have just severe test anxiety? Or I remember when I took the ACT, there were kids that just didn't want to be there, and their parents made them go take it. And so they, drew smiley faces with the bubbles and then took a nap. So I appreciate you explaining that that's where those came from.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, thank you all for presenting. It's good information. Kind of tailcoating on what Mr. Begley had said. So right now we're 75 juniors participating, but it is free to all juniors because of what we just discussed, correct? Okay, good. That's excellent. And I want to give you a big thumbs up for the top 3 areas. I mean, the kids are overwhelmed. Fatigue is everywhere, so focusing on those top 3 areas, I think that's a great choice. Gives them some targets to hit, and those are very important. And then the 4-day boot camp, I think you alluded 6 hours for 2 days, right? And then the other 2 days are how long?
6 hours.
Oh, so all 4 days.
It'll be 250 students in 5 groups, so it's 50 students in 1 group.
Okay.
So we'll have a group of 2 go the first 2 days, and then the last 2 days, a group of 3 will go.
Okay, I got you.
They'll be all in separate locations, receiving that intensive remediation.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And I like the idea of the camouflage and getting the teachers and everything, because kids dig that. They do buy into that. They participate a lot more. So again, kudos for thinking outside the box and bringing everybody in to make that happen for the kids. I love the idea. Thank you.
Do you have some more questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a bunch for doing this. This is really important. I guess what I'm still concerned about is whether or not, we're going to have enough time with our juniors to move the basic range, the average kid up to a non-remediation type score. As I look at this, it's about 6 points that they would need in science, 5 in math, 5 in reading, and about 4 in English. Based on what we've done with Torch Prep in the past, do we have data that shows what the average score has moved to? I mean, have they been able to get any movement beyond 2 or 3 points? Because moving 6, 5, 4 points is a lot. And usually it takes, quite a bit of time and attention, lots of test taking, retaking those tests in order to get your time factor up. Because sometimes it's not just a matter of the content, it's the time. It's the time. Like, if you took, like, the majority of these kids and you gave them all the time in the world without all the pressure to take those tests, you would be amazed at what the scores would be. The scores would be really, really much improved. So it's that time, impact on everything. And so with the boot camp, with it being, a 4-hour boot camp, will you be able to have those kids practice enough of these tests to improve the time element of it? That's my concern. And having dealt with ACT preparation for my kids, I can definitely tell you that the time portion of it is what gives them such a difficult time. So if we have past information from Torch Prep that shows where they've been able to move those scores, I would definitely like to see that. I definitely think Torch Prep is great, and I want to see our kids do that. But I also want to see them engage in a program that they can do perhaps all year long. Every year on a certain amount of time. I don't know if it could be something done in class where they actually just have to take practice ACTs so that they're improving their time at those tests all year instead of just a month interval. Because in order to move 6 points, 5 points, 4 points, that takes a lot. And I just would love if we would consider not only Torch Prep, have that, that's a very important component, but also look at what you can do for the whole year. Like how much time can you devote, maybe monthly, maybe weekly, to having a little drill where the kids would have to take these practice ACTs so they can improve their time element for a whole year. That would really get those scores up, because I am concerned that for our juniors who are going to be taking the ACT in February, based on the median ranges here with this pre-ACT, I am concerned about whether or not they're making benchmark. Now, I know some of these scores in here are pretty low, and I'm glad you guys explained what was happening with that, because I probably was one of the ones with a sour expression in seeing that. But, just having gone through this a lot with my own children, I've gotten a little bit of information and some skills on it, and it's just going to take a lot to move that. So with the sophomores that we've been testing, we have our launch test scores for our sophomores. I think we have a great chance of really building and getting that speed proficiency in there, but it will take all year. I think it's going to take some time. So if that's something that we could think about, you know, taking torch prep, not just from this time interval, but building it in all year possibly. I don't know how expensive that would be. I don't know how you could do it, when you could do it, but I do believe that that time element, that speed proficiency is critical if you're going to move the scores. You know, the content is great. It's great to have the content, but it's the speed at which you take that test. And kids have to get past those nerves. They have to be able to develop skills in order to get past that, that crunch of time that makes them so nervous. That's why you can have a kid that has a 4.3 and still not do well on the ACT because of that test anxiety. Test anxiety, you have to have, you know, skills and things like that. So I'm glad that we're doing this. I think we're going to just need to do, I think we're going to need to do more. I do. I'm looking at the average, and I'm looking at where the benchmark is, and that tells me we're going to need to do more. But this is a great first step, and I'm so grateful for you guys doing it. It's just if we can have torch prep come in more often and possibly build something into our whole year.
If I could respond just to a couple of things. This is really the first year that we're using torch prep with Fidelity. Last year, it was really the genesis of our partnership. They did a little bit of professional development with the staff. We did sections of the practice test, but we didn't do a full-fledged practice run through. Torch prep is extremely expensive, but their formula works. There was a story I watched on NBC Nightly News last year that showed the average across the United States for the ACT is almost flatlined over the last 20 years. But the numbers of perfects is rising exponentially. And they tied it directly into these test prep companies like Torch Prep that have figured out a formula to get the kids there. So one of the things that we were open and honest with Torch Prep is that all of our kids deserve this. Torch Prep is extremely expensive. Like I said that before. Not all of our kids can afford that service. So this program that we developed gets all of our kids some exposure to their proven formula to work. They absolutely recognize that time element. Some of the things that they provided to our staff last year were things that they give to the kids in their test prep that deals with that time element, pacing themselves, understanding where they are on the test, understanding what questions to throw away and come back to, those sorts of things. And the kids will get those testing strategies in that intensive boot camp. And one thing I just wanted to clarify, the intensive boot camp is 2 days for 6 hours each, so it's a total of 12 hours for each of those kids. But their method works. I mean, it really does. And this program was, you know, we didn't come to them and say, here are your restrictions, you only get 12 hours. This is what they came to us and said, here's what we've done in other schools, this works. So we listened to them in that. I am very confident that if we identify the right 250, and we spent a lot of time identifying the right 250, and I just want to be open and honest, there are some kids on the list that might be knuckleheads. I don't want a knucklehead in there that's going to bring down the rest of the group. So we had those open and honest conversations. I want kids that walk in the door and are all in for this. Torch prep method is excitement. They're pumped up. It's jazz. It's not just sit here and drill. They're going to make it an event that day. So I want kids that are engaged and all in. So again, we identify kids with purpose that can get to that finish line, that are going to be all in on this process. I'm very confident that we're going to see those increases this year. It's not going to be the end point that we want, but again, it's our first year with Torch Prep. Taking these incremental steps and really starting to talk about what we can do in 9th grade on up, I think that will see long-term the gains that we want.
In shorter to reiterate what Mr. Rice said, Torch Prep has been great. They've really they've gone above and beyond in providing us with a plethora of resources that they really didn't have to. Like he stated, with the extensive boot camp, that's 6 hours per day. They're also providing those tips and test-taking strategies to the content area teachers. That's something I asked from Rhett, the founder, to, hey, Rhett, is there anything you can provide us that I can provide to the content area teachers that will allow them to present test-taking strategies? test-taking tips, how to eliminate questions, move on, come back to questions, and he provided me with that information free of charge. So I just think it's about being transparent and letting the vendors know what you want. I know it's expensive, but they've been great. They've been great. And I know we won't get it in just 1 year, but I look at building upon our relationship with Torch Prep and continuing moving forward.
And let me be clear, I want this. I'm also asking for a little bit more. So I'm being greedy. I'm trying to see if there's a way we can get more. But this is good. I'm very grateful for this. I have no problems with it. I'm just saying, is there a way we can get a little bit more? Just keep on going. You know, we got to keep pushing the boundaries a little bit.
And the balance
Skip a little
always
bit,
is.
we want more, so.
The balance always is that
Money.
we still have the EOCs that we're dealing with as well, right? So we have content that we have to get through for state standards to get our kids to achieve on the EOC tests as well. So, that time is that finite element that if we can't get more of it. So, we're balancing those 7 tests that they have to have for graduation requirements, but at the same time, knowing that we need the ACT because it's all on the report card. Thank you, ODE. So, we're always playing that balance of that moving target and how do we just get more time and more effort out of our kids.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned that it's all on the report card, because this year, the Prepared for Success is the only thing that's looked at on the report card. It's all important, and, this is the thing that launches the kids to the next level. In a lot of places, the ACT is optional for admission, but it's still not optional when it comes to scholarships. And some of our kids, they need to have as much preparation so that they can go out there and compete and get those monies for college. So, I see this as just as important as the other pieces. It's all important. So, thanks for mentioning that and just reminding everybody that all of it's important. And it's not just this piece, it's all of it. And I'm very grateful to see what you guys are doing. But I am greedy, so I'm sorry, sue me. But I just want our kids to have
I think the word you look at is
everything.
passionate. You're passionate. You're not greedy.
Passionate. I just want them to have, I want them to have all of it. And our kids should be able to meet these benchmarks, get these monies for college, and they deserve it. And so I know with your team, we're going to get there. And I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I do.
And we are committed, to continuing this and going deeper each year. It is going to take time for it all to develop. And I think just very excited, this year is like our toe in the water, to see how this goes. And, like you mentioned, even in light of the fact that many colleges are no longer requiring a certain ACT or SAT score, there's even legislation in the state right now to remove the requirement to give the ACT to juniors throughout the state. But even in light of that, like you said, it's still important for our kids, especially when it comes to scholarship monies. And so we're going to keep at it and keep, trying to go a little bit deeper into the work each year.
Mr. Smith, did you want to add something?
I did, and Belina and Mr. Birding, you captured it. It is passion, and I appreciate your passion. And that passion is why we are having this presentation tonight. If you go back over the last couple of years and you think back to some of the conversations that we've been having, and I do want to thank Katie and Bill and Kareem and Mandy, the other administrators at the high school and the staff leadership here. Bill mentioned that, it's unacceptable for our students to score below the state average. And you've probably heard me have that conversation before. Our students are better than that. I know our staff is better than that. And for several years, we were having the conversation about something is off. Something where there's a disconnect somewhere. why are we seeing below state average numbers? And everything you've heard tonight, this is all new. And listening to them speak this evening, you've heard us talk about being strategic. And I heard some of that in that presentation, and you see some of that in this packet. And again, being strategic comes from that passion because we want the best for our kids and we want them to excel. And sometimes we just need help. And Bill talked about Torch Prep and these other companies. They've mastered it to some degree. That's why we're seeing these numbers that are up there. And so, again, that's the passion is why we are hearing this tonight, and in the midst of a global pandemic. And you know, because we talk about right now, of all times, our kids, they need us. You know, they need us more than they've ever needed us before in a lot of ways. But we are still, you know, again, we talk about balance all of the time, but we are still trying to move our kids forward, you know, while meeting their needs in all of these other areas. So I'm really excited. I think it's off to a great start, and I'm excited to see where it takes us. But I think the two of you captured in that conversation. This is all about passion, and I'm so excited because we've been talking about having that conversation for several years. You know, where is the disconnect? And so we're doing things differently to try to make that connection so that to benefit our kids, which is what it's all about. So I want to thank everyone here and thank the board for their support to allow that, you know, those investments into these kinds of programs so that we can better meet the needs of our kids. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you all very much for your presentation. It was very enlightening, and appreciate the hard work that you're putting into our students. And please try to be home by 10 o'clock tonight.